Hey, it's Silver, and today we're going to take a look at some demos, because, well, I love demos. I was that kid that always got the official PlayStation magazine every month just to have the demo disc, and then got really sad when they switched to doing only PlayStation 2 demos because I couldn't afford a PS2 yet, and then eventually got one, and I actually kept all of my old demo discs and then played them back to back to see what all I missed. But yeah, demos are awesome, and just because the AAA gaming scene has mostly abandoned the demo scene doesn't mean that demos aren't still important for the consumer and really useful to have. So I feel that it's worth rewarding smaller devs and smaller publishers and things that have taken the time to create some demos to get the game in people's hands. So every now and then I'm going to just be taking a look at some demos that I'm excited for, some upcoming games, as a way to get a quick peek at them and maybe give them a little bit of extra attention. So the first two demos that I wanted to take a look at were both deck builders that caught my eye, the first being Shattered Heaven. This caught my eye because it's beautiful. It's a really pretty game. It has really, really nice character art, fantastic portraits, beautiful card art, and the cards themselves have very tarot-esque appearance. They're even like narrow and tall, more like tarot cards than playing cards. It goes for a really striking aesthetic that I really like the look of, and the music for the game is also very striking. It makes a good impression when you first boot it up because you get this sort of somber, sad soundtrack that sounds really good in the context of the game. And in fact, the game itself seems to have a lot of lore available too. There's even like an entire encyclopedia that you can look through. As more of the lore is uncovered, you get to look at the various definitions in your dictionary to actually figure out what's going on and learn more about this world. And that's a good way to do it, and is pretty rare in deck builders, and I think it's very cool as a lore hound, someone that loves to look at lore like that. It's a really good idea, and the game itself has some pretty cool other ideas as well. Like, for one, the dungeon exploration is interesting because it's not the traditional Slay the Spire map sort of concept. Instead, it's an actual dungeon map that you go from room to room in just by clicking, and every room can have all sorts of things, from different events, combats, absolutely nothing, treasures to uncover, doors to unlock, all sorts of stuff. So it's worth exploring every single square of the dungeon if you have the health to do so. Enemies do not respawn or anything like that, so you're encouraged to clear out the entire floor if you can, because you'll be getting the best stuff by doing so. Combat is really fun because each of the three characters, you play as three characters in a party, they're all very different from each other. They have completely different sets of mechanics and keywords on their cards and stuff, and it makes them all play entirely differently, which is really cool. You have a more warrior-like character that has this cool mechanic where if she plays one of each of the three kinds of card for 3 turns in a row, she can go into this like super form, basically, that gives her like incredible power for just 1 turn and allows you to do a ton of damage or even buff your team up or whatever you want to do for that turn. It's really effective. You've also got a more tanky character that has this rage mechanic, because every character not only has a deck of cards unto themselves, but they also have some active skills that you can activate whenever you want, and these are normally on cooldowns, but for this character they're instead fueled with rage, so they don't go on cooldown at all, but they require this rage resource to be activated. And they mostly gain rage by playing the ruby cards, the red ones, which are usually offensive in some way. And then you have the other character, my personal favorite, who is this creepy, sort of blind oracle lady that has a weird ghost thing with her. And she has this bar called Thirst, and as you play cards, you can build up thirst. And once you have some, this creepy ghost thing will manifest next to her, and the next cards that you play will actually have a different effect that will expend some of this thirst, but use this spirit thingy in order to empower the card's effect somehow, which makes her a sort of resource management modal kind of character. It's a really neat combat system, honestly, and it's pretty satisfying to set up the various different combos that you have access to even in the demo. And the fact that there are this many different card mechanics, all these different keywords and stuff to memorize for each character, means that I can see a lot of build variety and a lot of depth in this game's combat system already, just by the capability of all these different keywords and stuff. It's clear there's going to be quite a lot of different things that you could potentially focus on for each character and how to build them, because you have access to their full deck outside of battle and you can change it however you want. They have a deck of a certain number of cards, and you can gain all sorts of other cards as you adventure and then sort of mess around with what they have access to. Another really interesting idea the game has is that when you complete a battle and actually get a draft of new cards, you get 3, and you have to give 1 to each person, but you can only give 1 to each person specifically. Like, you can't have multiple of them go to the same person. You got to spread them evenly, which is a really interesting way to do it. That's an unusual mechanic for a deck builder like this, and it also means that card removal services are very valuable, because, you know, every time you complete a battle, you have to give each character 1 card of some kind of the 3 that you found. There's also one other really cool idea that I like a lot, in that there are some generic cards that can be given to anyone, but they have special effects depending on who you give them to. So even though they can be put in anyone's deck, they'll do something extra, something special, depending on who you actually give it to, and that means those cards are extra flexible because they have a different use depending on who's actually holding them that turn, which is a really neat idea. And again, it really helps with the concept that there's probably going to be a lot of build variety in this game. There also seems to be a pretty good amount of meta progression, I noticed. There's these various orbs you can find that increase your character's stats, allowing them to get through different events more successfully and boost their cards and some other stuff like that. You can also find these dark bones that you can use to get a more traditional roguelite progression system where you have like a tree of upgrades to purchase outside of battle. And there's even an alchemy system that allows you to experiment and combine random reagents you find and try and make new potions and stuff to take on your journeys with you. So this is going to be a really interesting one to keep an eye on. It's a very fully featured roguelite deck builder that I'm excited to try the full version of, and the story is actually quite good so far. The world is really fascinating. They've put a lot of effort into its presentation as a story, as a narrative, and it definitely makes me want to learn more about this weird, tragic world where everything sucks. So yeah, that's Shattered Heaven. Next on my list was Jupiter Moon's Mecha, and this one caught my eye because, well, if you put a mech in your game and let me pilot it, then I will play it no matter what. And the cool thing about Jupiter Moons is it's basically a distillation of the classic, like, mech warrior style mech sim genre type of game down to a roguelite deck builder form. So you have a fully customizable mech at your disposal, and you have various different components that you can find from battles and probably from shops and stuff later, and you can put these on wherever you want or wherever they will fit. You have arms, legs, a torso, and a head, and they each have a sort of grid of stuff, and you can put things in that grid to equip your mech with them. You can put new weapons on your arms, or maybe put some armor on your head to make it harder to damage and some other stuff like that. And there's all kinds of different components, each of them having different cards that they give you in your deck when you equip them. And you got to balance your mech out pretty well because, of course, it simulates things like how easy a part is to hit. So if you have, say, like 4 weapons on your right arm, then your right arm is really likely to take a bunch of damage because it's going to be much easier to hit than anything else. And you really don't want to put all your weapons on one arm like that, not only for that reason, but also because if a part gets destroyed, because this game does have the classic mech warrior style zones where every part of your mech does actually take damage individually and can be destroyed. If any of your parts get destroyed, any of the components on that part are lost for a while. You can't use them. So if an arm goes out and it has a bunch of your weapons on it, then all of those cards that those weapons give you are grayed out in battle and you can't use them until you repair that arm. I really like that the battles take place from a first-person perspective because it really ties the whole mech simulation game thing together, just like how those games worked. You know, you were always first-person, and it also uses some other common mech sim mechanics, like, say, heat. As you play ability and weapon cards, you generate heat, and if you generate too much heat, you start to take damage on your components every turn, and if you generate even more than that, you can actually completely shut down until your heat dissipates a little bit, so you won't be able to do anything for several turns, which is very bad for you. But of course, you can also do this to your enemies, and I assume in the full game there will probably be things like flamers or something similar that allow you to build up a lot of heat on your enemies and shut them down on purpose. It's overall a really cool take on the roguelite deck builder thing because I've never seen a first-person mech sim done in this style before, and I think it's really cool that they are taking a lot of the common elements that those games always had and actually transitioning them into a turn-based deck builder format very faithfully. So I'm excited to see where this one goes for sure. I'm hoping for a lot of equipment variety, lots of cool builds to do, maybe some new chassis to try out with different capabilities and things. Hopefully it's a really good, customizable deck builder with a lot of stuff to find, a lot of run variety and stuff. So definitely keeping an eye on this one. Now, the next 2 games I wanted to take a look at are shooters, both of them shooters that I'm very excited for, and also, coincidentally, both of them are shooters that are taking inspiration from the Fear games, especially the first one, which I'm a big fan of because I loved Fear. I think it's a fantastic FPS, and also it's one of those games in the sort of mid-2000s shooter scene where we're not seeing a lot of other people taking inspiration from that era yet. I think we will as time goes forward, but these are some of the earlier examples that I've seen so far of games taking an onus from that era of FPS and creating something with it, and the first one, of course, is Selaco. Selaco was actually built using GZ Doom, which blows my mind because I don't understand how that's physically possible. It does not feel like GZ Doom at all, and I'm not insulting GZ Doom in any way. It's actually a perfectly fine FPS engine. It works quite well. It's well regarded for a reason. It's just this doesn't feel like a project made on that as an engine. It feels a little bit different. The movement, the gun handling, all that stuff, it just doesn't feel like GZ Doom anymore. They've obviously done a tremendous amount of customization work to get it to this stage, and really the name of the game here is environmental interaction. This is a game that takes a lot of cues from stuff like John Woo's movies like Hard Boiled, and of course stuff like the Matrix lobby scene, that school of shooter cinematics where as soon as the bullets start flying, the entire environment just explodes into activity with, tiles shattering and glass breaking and papers flying through the air and all that crazy stuff. This game has so much environmental detail and interactivity that it's actually incredible. There's so much happening in every firefight with a lot of stuff, fog and smoke and blood, of course, and even stuff like leaves. If you fire through planters over a windowsill or something, you actually see shredded trails of leaves fly around and stuff. There's just so much detail, and it makes the firefights in this game feel really kinetic, and the sound assets as well as the animations help with that and make the gunplay in this game extremely satisfying and meaty. It's really heavy and solid feeling. And of course the enemies themselves are very important because in Fear the enemies gave you that illusion of communication, that they were talking back and forth to each other because of the clever AI tricks that were being used. And this game does very much the same thing. The enemies actually communicate with each other, they talk, they respond to things that you do. They'll even notice if you're really low on health, they'll notice your flashlight, they'll notice you trying to flank them and they'll try to outflank you and deploy grenades to flush you out and then wait at the only exit you can come out of and all sorts of stuff like that. There's a ton of tactical gunplay that's being done here that makes it a really impressive project from a moment-to-moment gameplay standpoint. The map design is also definitely a standout here because they are interconnected in that classic early to mid 2000s FPS sort of way, and they also have a lot of complexity to them, a good amount of verticality, a lot of hidden secrets and other Easter eggs and stuff to find for sure, and they're definitely a joy to explore. The level design in this game is very solid, so this is one that I am absolutely excited for because it's clear they have put a ton of love and poured so much attention to detail into this game to make its environments very reactive and fascinating to watch during a firefight and have the actual gunplay itself be really satisfying. And of course the variety of guns you have also helps with that because they are all fun to use and interesting, and I'm excited to see what the full game's arsenal has in it because I'm expecting some exotic and weird stuff, kind of like how Fear got in the end. So yeah, definitely excited for this one, and of course that leads me to the other one I took a look at, which is Trepang2. Or Trepang squared? Trepang2, we're going to say. This game also very clearly takes a lot of inspiration from Fear, and it looks like it as well. It just looks and feels very similar to Fear, and you have a lot of Fear-like moves. You have a pretty meaty melee combat system. You have a jump kick. You can grab dudes from behind and use them as human shields or just break their necks if you want to. And of course, you have quite a lot of weapons to choose from. The gunplay in this game is something we'll get back to in a minute because it's something special. And you've also got a bullet time effect that you can activate whenever you want naturally because, if the game is taking inspiration from Fear, it's got to have bullet time. And you also have a crisis-like cloak that you can use in order to sneak around. You can't use it for very long, but it is very effective. It makes you pretty much completely invisible. Enemies in this game also take a lot from the Fear school of encounter design, where they're very smart, they're very good at intercommunicating, or at least giving the illusion of communicating, they're very good at flanking, they're good at surrounding you and then flushing you out with explosives and some other stuff like that. They are smart, and I played both Selaco and Trepang on hard, and I found that it was a really well-balanced difficulty both times, because firefights were very lethal in each case, where if you're just standing out in the open, you're going to get torn up really fast, but enemies also don't tank a whole bunch of shots either. So this means firefights are very fast and very frantic, where the bodies all drop real quick. Pretty much as soon as the firefight starts, you either win or lose pretty soon, because you're not going to be sitting there taking a whole bunch of fire without getting seriously damaged. And yes, you can still shoot grenades out of the air or just detonate them in midair by shooting them in bullet time or whatever you want. So that is a necessary feature, I feel, for any game that's taking Fear's inspiration. But the star here is the gunplay. The guns in this game feel really good. The sound effects are really metallic and detailed sounding. They sound really nice. They have a lot of depth to them. The firing effects are really bassy and very loud, and they have that sort of high-pitched cracking sound that you would expect from a gunshot being quite close up to them. And then, of course, the actual feel of the gunplay itself is really mid-2000s, but extra chunky. You do not have aim down sights, just as you didn't in Fear, but you do have some really useful sort of tracers through the air, especially, of course, in bullet time, where you can get a good feel for how the weapons themselves each individually fire. And ammo management is very important, of course, because you don't have a lot of ammo that you can hold at any given time, so you're always sort of scrounging on the ground for more. But the thing for me is the shotgun, right? I will judge any Fear-inspired game by its shotgun, because the shotgun in Fear was, in my opinion, one of the best video game shotguns ever. I love the Spaz 12, I believe it was, in Fear. It's just such a fantastic weapon. It's really satisfying to hit things with, and it's really cool to go into bullet time and watch the trails of all the little individual pellets cut through the air. And this game gets the shotgun right. Trepang's shotgun, which is the same style, has a really metallic, clanky, very trebly sound effect for pumping the shotgun. And of course, the firing sound effect is like thunder from the sky. It's really loud and really bassy. And yeah, it sends enemies flying. It does huge amounts of damage. It reduces enemies into a red mist oftentimes. And you can, of course, go into bullet time and watch all the individual pellets fly through the air and destroy everything they touch. It is a really, really satisfying shotgun. And if this game gets its gunplay this good, especially with things like the shotgun and the FAMAS, I noticed have very fun gunplay, and even the pistol that you start out with is actually pretty satisfying. I think that's another thing that you can judge this era of games on in terms of their arsenal, is how good is their pistol. And the pistol in this game is really quite chunky and satisfying, so yeah, I think that this game's arsenal is going to be really, really fun to use, and I'm expecting some silly stuff later on, because of course Fear had things like the Penetrator, which allowed you to nail dudes to walls. It had that railgun thing towards the end that like reduced enemies to skeletons instantly, so I'm expecting some other silly stuff later on, hopefully, and if they're as satisfying as the assault rifle and the shotgun are in the demo, then I'm definitely excited for what comes after that. But there's a look at 4 upcoming interesting games, some of which will be coming out pretty soon, some of which not quite as much, but still, their demos are available, and I will link you in the description to each of the game's individual store pages so that you can go and check them out yourself, because that's one of the cool things about doing videos on demos, is you can immediately go and play them yourself if you want to, without paying anything. So there you go. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.